If someone broke into the place that held your family's last proof of ownership, would you call the police or let justice meet them face to face? The chain snaps, papers scatter, and the thief bolts straight into the yard, clutching what could erase an entire legacy. A trained K-9 explodes forward, seconds away from biting down on the truth she tried to steal. This is the moment where reputations shatter and the neighborhood learns who really holds the power. Before we start, hit that like button and tell us in the comments where you're watching from so we know you're standing with us. So stick around, because what happens next will have you shouting at your screen. If you're feeling that rush already, tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a quick comment telling us where you're watching from. We love seeing this community stand together. If someone tore into the place holding your family's last proof and ran with it pressed to their chest, would you reach for a phone or let justice sprint on four legs and in the lie in broad daylight? The chain snaps like a verdict. Aries stiffens, one low growl that says now. Kara Whitfield sprints from the barn in a white suit that screams power until fear stains it. Papers slap her wrists as she runs. Zane Rourke doesn't move. He gives Aries the single word the dog was born to obey. Kara thought a board title made her untouchable. She thought the ledger she yanked would erase a boundary line and turn a son into a trespasser on his father's soil. She didn't think about teeth. She didn't think about witnesses. She didn't think about the way laughter sounds when a man realizes the trap isn't under his feet anymore. Gideon Pike idles at the curb in a sedan that has watched too many quiet threats. He pretends to scroll, eyes up, measuring exits. Aries launches. The crowd that wasn't there a minute ago is suddenly everywhere. Blinds twitch, footsteps collect. A teenager named Noor lifts a phone and starts a live stream because her heart is hammering and stories this sharp cut through screens. Kara throws words over her shoulder, breathless orders for Zane to call off the animal, frantic claims about code violations and safety, that tired script people read when they need a villain on demand. Zane answers nothing, arms folded, the kind of stillness that makes liars talk faster. Aries shreds distance like it never existed. Sirens thread into the street. Deputy Elena Cruz swings in fast, a practiced calm riding on top of suspicion. Dispatch tagged this as an animal attack. Kara planned that label 5 minutes ago. But Elena sees what Kara forgot to hide. A busted chain on the barn door, fresh bite marks in the bolt cutter handle, an HOA badge swinging from a lanyard that should have stayed behind a desk. Bodycam captures all of it while Aries funnels Kara toward the fence. Engagement spikes inside Noor's chat. Viewers fire questions, outrage, advice, heart emojis for the dog that looks like consequence with a heartbeat. Gideon rolls his neck, the way a man does when he's already calculating plan B. He wanted the ledger gone and the owner humiliated. The ledger is in Kara's hands. The humiliation is deciding which direction to land. Kara stumbles and regains, flings a handful of papers to distract the dog. Aries doesn't blink. Zane finally speaks, not to beg, not to warn. He tells Elena that the right page will look wrong in sunlight. He nods at Kara's foot. Kara freezes, then tries to cover a single sheet with her heel like a magician palming a card he shouldn't have pulled. Elena steps in, sharp, firm. She orders Kara to drop the pages. Kara trembles, eyes wet, and mutters that this is harassment, that she is the president, that the rules are on her side. Noor's comments flood with one-word verdicts. Aries holds, muzzle inches from the margin where a forged seal would glow if it were real. Zane lets out one short laugh. Not cruel, just final. He reminds Kara of the board inspection that never happened, the sign-in log no one ever signed, the rumor about a traveling notary who died last year, yet somehow stamped this week's date on a transfer of his back lot to a nameless company with Gideon's scent all over it. Gideon lifts both hands through the sedan window like none of this touches him. Kara breaks and lunges for a tear. Aries surges, a thunderbolt with a heartbeat, and Kara freezes again, shoes skidding. Elena lifts the page from under that heel. Noor leans in. The chat goes quiet in the way an arena goes quiet before a punch lands. Sunlight kisses the paper and a heat-sensitive watermark blooms where a county seal should be. The word that appears is not approval. It is ruin. Kara tries to rip, but Aries snaps the air by her wrist, and she flinches hard enough to stumble into the fence. Elena holds the page where the camera can see. The ghost lettering reads void. Kara's poise evaporates. She starts pleading for process, for fairness, for time. Zane counters with receipts. He taps his phone, opens a folder labeled Ledger Ghost, a timeline of threats and midnight fines, and the kind of messages people send when they think their titles keep their hands clean. Noor narrates to thousands now. She calls out the HOA seal on the stolen pages. She repeats Kara's own rules back to her in the comments scrolling past. Elena radios for a supervisor and legal, then hears nothing but static. The line goes dead. Somewhere between dispatch and the block, someone lifted a finger and pressed silence. Gideon steps out of the sedan in the hush like he's walking on stage. He claps slow, the rhythm of a warning. He says the word misunderstanding like it's a key. He offers Zane a neat apology, a review, a private meeting. Noor's audience laughs in text. Zane keeps staring at Kara, not the offer. He tells Elena to check the watermark on every page, not just this one. He suggests the notary's obituary, the LLC registry, the board text thread that misfired him a screenshot with 3 names and 1 plan. Make the barn empty before Monday. Kara's hands shake so hard the last page rattles. She whispers that she didn't know it would go this far. She blames Gideon. She blames confusion. She blames a system that punishes delay. Aries exhales a heavy, patient growl that says the air is done with excuses. Elena's jaw sets. She reads the notarization date aloud. Tomorrow. A paper signed in a day that hasn't happened. Noor's chat detonates. Fraud trends in real time. Neighbors step closer, some with their own violation slips folded in fists. A boy points out the warning sign on the fence, the one Kara ignored when she crossed onto land she wanted renamed. Zane looks up at that sign and then past it, toward the barn, toward the life his father built one exhausted evening at a time. Elena asks the question that turns everything from spectacle to case. Do you want to press charges? Zane answers with a sentence that doesn't beg or boast. He says start with theft, add forgery, hold for tampering, and make sure the body cam sees what my father didn't live to see. Kara swallows and tries to speak again. Her voice fails. The white suit has nothing left to say. Aries edges closer until Kara's choice is reduced to truth or teeth. She stops moving. Elena slides a glove under the page and tilts it to the light one more time. The void glows hotter, a brand on paper. Gideon laughs under his breath like there's a trapdoor the rest of them can't see. He angles his chin toward the barn, a motion so small it almost hides the promise inside it. Kara makes one last grab. Aries answers with a snap that doesn't touch skin but strips courage. Elena steps between and steadies the scene with the weight of a badge. Noor whispers into the stream that this is the moment where a neighborhood learns who it belongs to. Zane finally looks at Gideon. He says 5 quiet words and hands them to the world like nails. Check what's under her shoe. Elena lifts. Sun finds the forgery. The seal blooms wrong. Kara's face cracks in the middle like glass under heat. She lunges for the proof she tried to make real by running fast enough. Aries moves with her, and the crowd inhales as one. The frame freezes on impact that hasn't happened yet, truth and consequence trapped inches apart, while Gideon's smile sharpens towards something none of them have named. Elena's gloved hand holds the page to the sun, and the word void blooms like a bruise that finally tells the truth. Kara folds in on herself, breath jerking, lips searching for a defense that isn't there. Zane stays still, arms crossed, the hint of a smile that says the finish line isn't a place, it's proof. Aries waits, chest rising slow, eyes never leaving the trembling hands that tried to erase a family with stationery. Kara tries that official tone again, the one that used to make neighbors shrink. It falls apart halfway through the first command. She points at bylaws, at safety, at order, and the words clang like broken cutlery on concrete. Zane answers with names and timestamps, a neat ledger in his phone labeled Ledger Ghost. He taps one file, and there it is, midnight fines with tomorrow's date, a board vote that never happened, a message Gideon sent to the wrong thread. He reads it calmly, each sentence a fuse. Noor's livestream surges until her arms shake. Viewers type fast, outraged, sending hearts for Aries like blessings for a soldier who followed orders better than any politician ever did. Someone comments that fear looks different when it wears pearls. Another says this is why people hate boards that forget they serve the block, not own it. If you were standing here right now, would you accept a private apology or make this a public lesson everyone remembers? Elena radios for a supervisor and the line turns to snow. She tries again, firm, professional. Nothing. Kara's eyes flick sideways, and that split-second flinch tells Zane everything. He shifts his weight. Not a threat, just readiness. A language bullies forgot men like him still speak. Elena clocked it too. She moves closer to Kara, not to shield her from the dog, but to shield the evidence from her. Gideon steps from the sedan like a curtain being pulled back. He claps once, slow, and calls this a misunderstanding. He suggests a friendly review, a special meeting, an expedited solution. Zane doesn't blink. He answers with one line that lands harder than a punch. A notary cannot stamp a year after his funeral. The neighbors laugh in little shocked bursts they didn't know they had in them. Gideon's smile thins the way a mask does when a strap pops. A car door down the street opens and Mr. Latif shuffles out. Eyes wet with the shame he doesn't try to hide. He tells Elena in a quiet voice that he introduced Kara to that traveling notary years ago to hurry small things. He never imagined the favor would grow teeth. Kara snaps his name like a whip, then begs him with the same mouth. Zane's jaw tightens, pain sliding under the strength. Every family has a weak seam. Every con looks for it first. Elena asks again if Zane wants charges now or after a warrant. Zane chooses both. Start the paper. Start the cuffs. Keep the body cam rolling. Kara's breath hitches. She tries to say she was protecting the neighborhood, that Zane's land endangers property values, that she's the one who keeps chaos from the block. Aries leans forward 1 inch, and the sermon ends. Gideon tries a different route. He praises Zane's composure, calls him a reasonable man, offers to buy the back lot at a price that would make a stranger clap. Zane laughs once, short and bright. Reasonable men don't sell their fathers. He tells Gideon to aim that money at the attorney who will need it. Noor's chat spikes again. What would you have done hearing that number for dirt your family bled on? Fold, or put your spine where everyone can see it. A neighbor in a bathrobe joins, clutching a folder of fines dated the week her husband was in a hospital bed. She didn't fight then because grief made paperwork feel like a mountain. She holds up the folder now and says enough. Mrs. Calloway limps over with a cardboard box of a decade's threats, watches her hands shake as she passes it to Noor, then steadies them on Aries' head like the dog is the first honest official she's met in 10 years. Elena flips the void page and a second forgery peeks out, notarized for tomorrow at noon. Zane points at the date without touching it. Kara collapses into arguments that sound like a drowning person lecturing about lanes. She begs Gideon to fix it. He tells her to hold her nerve. She asks what happens if she can't. He shrugs like men do when they've already decided whose name will be under the bus. Noor catches a comment from a city clerk who happens to be watching. He recognizes Gideon's shell company from a complaint downtown. He posts a case number in the chat. Elena writes it on her palm with a Sharpie, a small act that feels like a door unlocking. Zane thanks the unseen stranger with a nod at the phone, then turns to Kara and asks the one question that drains her face of color. Where did you get the key that opened my lock? Kara says inspection. Zane says there was no inspection. Elena says there will be an inventory after your arrest. Kara turns to Mr. Latif, voice cracking. He says he never gave a key. She says then who did? The answer hovers like rain that hasn't decided where to fall. Gideon watches the space between them with a predator's patience. Aries suddenly snaps his head toward the barn. Not fear. Focus. Zane senses it, and every nerve goes alert. Kara sees the shift and tries to laugh it off, a sound so thin it breaks halfway. Elena angles her body between Kara and the fence. Noor's chat lights with a stream of comments that all ask the same thing in different words. What did they touch in there? Gideon tries one last gambit, voice soft like a pastor before a collection plate. He tells Zane this can end with dignity. He can return what doesn't belong, apologize for the misunderstanding, and the board will waive every fine, even send flowers for the memory of his father. Zane steps closer and finally lets himself speak the truth sitting behind his teeth all night. Dignity is earned, not mailed. Kara exhales a shudder that looks like surrender, but her eyes are still calculating, counting angles, testing the gap between Aries' patience and Elena's reach. Zane notices and simply shakes his head. The hope collapses inside her like a paper bridge under rain. Noor whispers that everyone watching knows this feeling. The instant you realize the rules you wrote for others just came for you. Elena's radio crackles. a sputter that becomes a voice from the DA's office. She shares case numbers, mentions the live stream, requests immediate guidance. The voice says hold positions, back up en route, catalog everything you can without contamination. Gideon's gaze flicks to the barn again, a micro wince, and now even Karis sees it. Zane doesn't move toward the door. He moves toward Gideon. He asks why dispatch went silent for 5 minutes and who leaned on whom to make that happen. Gideon smiles like a man introducing a guest. He nods toward the barn with the smallest tilt, as if revealing a magic trick only the arrogant think is clever. He says the live stream is about to learn what real leverage looks like. Nora's viewers type faster than eyes can follow. Elena tightens her stance. Aries rumbles, low and steady, ready to translate threat into consequence. Zane lifts a finger, and every sound on the lawn pauses as if pulled on a wire. He tells Gideon he has one chance to walk away with dignity. Gideon stares back with that empty calm men practice in mirrors. He says the barn has a surprise, and by the time anyone proves it's fake, the damage will be permanent. Mr. Latif whispers a prayer. Mrs. Calloway squeezes Nora's shoulder and tells her to keep the stream steady no matter what. Kara wipes her face and steels herself like someone about to run again. But there's nowhere left that doesn't lead back here. Elena signals for patience with 2 fingers. Zane gives Aries one soft word that means hold, and the dog settles into that perfect stillness only discipline can teach. Gideon tilts his head, almost kind, and points with his eyes at the dark doorway. He tells Zane he should really check what's waiting under the workbench. Elena's mouth goes tight. Zane's heart answers with a single heavy thud he refuses to show. Nor lifts the phone higher as comments flood in with one demand. Open the barn. Elena unlocks the barn with Zane's spare key while Aries presses close, muscles tight and eyes fixed, and for a heartbeat, even Gideon's confidence flickers like a bad signal. Because if something ugly waits inside, it won't stay hidden under anyone's title, will it? Zane tells Elena to keep the page with Void in her pocket and to record every breath from here on. Because the only thing stronger than a lie is a timeline. And tonight the timeline belongs to the people who refuse to be quiet, doesn't it? Nora's chat floods with warnings and prayers as Zane steps over the threshold first. Not to be a hero, but because his father's name is stapled to everything in here. And a son who lets strangers narrate his history ends up a stranger in his own life, right? Aries drifts left, nose low, then locks hard on a corner where the floor scuffs look fresh, and Zane kneels through the pounding in his ribs and drags a duffel from under a tarp that still smells like ink and arrogance. Because sabotage always thinks it wears cologne, doesn't it? Elena snaps photos while Zane unzips the bag and finds cash bands, forged receipts, a city inspector's name spelled correctly but signed like a child tracing his father's letters, and a checklist stamped non-compliant beside Zane's lot number in a handwriting that tries too hard to look bored. Who gets bored while stealing a man's home? Under the paperwork lies a photo of Zane's father, edges greasy, a black marker scrawl on the back that says this ends with you. And Zane feels the floor tilt as if grief just found a new hallway to run down. Because who writes over a dead man's smile and thinks there won't be interest? He doesn't rage, he catalogs. He points for Elena. He nods to Nor. He thanks Aries with a single word that always lands like a medal, because discipline is louder than fury when everyone's watching. And who wants calm like that on the other side of the argument they built? Elena radios the find, and the line dies mid-sentence. A clean cut that smells like influence. And Kara's mouth curls despite the tremor in her hands, as if someone promised her the quiet would stretch long enough to swallow evidence. But how long can silence stand when a neighborhood learns how to listen? Nor's stream catches a city clerk in the comments again, posting that the inspector whose name sits on those forms is on medical leave for 3 months, and the chat erupts with timestamps and case numbers and 100 new eyes that won't blink this time. Because isn't the internet a courtroom when the courthouse locks its doors? Zane pockets the photo of his father like a vow and tells Elena to bag the rest, to powder the zipper, to swab the handle where sweat dries like confessions, and every small instruction stacks a staircase to consequences. Because doesn't justice love a meticulous narrator? Aries jerks toward the rear wall, tail low, a warning more surgical than loud, and Zane peels back a loose board to reveal a second hide. Burner phone, prepaid cards, a neatly folded HOA envelope with the shell company's initials tucked like a signature, who hides their crime scenes inside the victim's house and calls it strategy. The phone boots to a thread labeled Monday, and the top message reads Stage Noncompliance Photo Set. Push to city file by noon, followed by a list of angles and a note that the dog is a variable. And Zane almost smiles at that, because the variable is the only honest constant he's got, isn't it? Elena seals the bag and tells Kara to keep her hands where everyone can see them. And Kara mutters that this is harassment while her eyes keep sliding toward the exit like a compass spun by fear. Because when the story stops obeying you, the only direction left is out, right? Gideon calls from the doorway that this has gone far enough and that respectable people handle their differences like adults. But respectable left the chat when a dead notary started signing tomorrow's. And who believes the word adult from a man who treats paperwork like a crowbar? Outside, an engine growl thickens into three, and tires grind to a stop on gravel in a formation that looks practiced, and Noor's lens snaps to tinted windows while comments stack like sandbags against whatever is about to walk out. Aren't numbers the armor of the unheard? Board members spill from SUVs in matching calm, faces that learn to weaponize neighborly smiles, and Gideon sweeps forward with a crowbar tucked against his leg like a habit he forgot to hide. Which kind of meeting brings a tool that speaks in dents? Mrs. Calloway's voice cuts in from the fence, brittle and steady, saying the board never knocks without a pen in one hand and a price in the other. And Noor pins her words to the stream like a banner, because elders who stop whispering change the whole climate, don't they? Elena plants herself between the barn and the line of suits, tells them to keep distance, to wait for a warrant, to breathe like citizens, and Gideon smiles like the son owes him a favor and says there's no need for theater if Zane simply returns what isn't his, whose hand writes that sentence without catching fire. Zane steps out with the duffel sealed, Aries pacing at his heel like a sentence that ends in period rather than question mark, and he tells Gideon that the only thing going back to anyone tonight is the truth, because lies do not get return policies, do they? Kara edges toward Gideon and whispers that this isn't what they discussed, and Gideon's jaw ticks once as if patience slipped and hit the floor, and he tells her to remember who paid the last legal bill. How many bills does it take to buy a spine that doesn't belong to you? A board member Zane barely recognizes flicks open a knife to pick his nails, a small theater that aims to seed fear, and Aries tips his head as if calculating distance to tendon. And Gideon notices and murmurs about calling dogs off before someone makes a mistake. Who taught these men to call accountability a mistake? Elena warns that one more step becomes assault, and one more word becomes obstruction, and Gideon laughs softly that definitions are flexible in emergencies. But emergencies look a lot like plans when your cousin is holding the lighter fluid. And how many cousins does it take to set a neighborhood on edge? Noor's chat hits a peak as viewers start dropping their own HOA stories like confessions in a chapel that finally learned to answer. And Zane feels the city tilt toward him for the first time since the first fine arrived at midnight like a dare. Isn't momentum the one thing corruption can't counterfeit? Gideon's smile drops, and the crowbar kisses his palm as he tells Zane to hand over the duffel, or the next thing they break won't be wood. And for a breath the lawn hums with a quiet that tastes like the second before thunder. What price gets paid when a threat stops pretending to be polite? Elena shifts her weight, signals backup with a terse update, and the static on her radio clears into a promise that units are minutes away. And Gideon's eyes click from Zane to the barn to the phone, Noor holds like a torch. Which blaze eats faster, a building on fire or a story that finally found oxygen? Zane lifts the duffel shoulder high and says it's going nowhere but evidence, then nods to Aries with a word that means protect, and the dog locks on Gideon's stance like a sculptor considering the next chisel strike. How many inches of space keep men honest? Kara pleads for calm that never belonged to her, saying this can be handled internally with dignity. And Zane answers that dignity is not a room with locked doors. And Mrs. Calloway says dignity is a receipt. And Noor's viewers hammer hearts until the chat looks like a siren. Doesn't love become a weapon when it gathers? The board member with the knife flicks it shut and steps too close. And Aries moves one paw forward, a silent grammar that turns future tense into present. And Elena's hand floats near her cuffs as she tells him to back up now. How quickly does bravado evaporate when the law starts measuring wrists? Gideon angles the crowbar toward the fence post and cracks it clean, a snap that bounces down everyone's spine. And he says settle this by handing over the bag or watch something dear splinter. What breaks first tonight? Wood or the illusion these people ever own this block? Noor's phone shakes but the frame holds, and comments chant names like a crowd at a reckoning. And Zane's face goes calm in the way mountains look right before they shed rock. Where do bullies look when the ground stops agreeing to hold them up? Gideon takes one long step and tilts the crowbar toward Zane's shoulder as if testing weight. And Elena doesn't wait for a second step. She grabs his wrist, twists clean, slams him into the rail, and the metal sings against his breath while Aries squares to the nearest suit, who writes the minutes when a meeting turns into a memory people tell their children. Two board members move and stop at the same time when Aries bears a fraction of tooth, and Kara wrings her hands around air that refuses to shape into control, and Zane lifts his father's photo to Gideon's face, so the smirk has to look into the eyes it tried to erase. What does it do to a man when he's forced to meet the gaze he wrote out of the story? Elena snaps the cuff on Gideon's right wrist and reaches for the left, and he jerks once, hard, enough to make the crowbar drop and bounce near Zane's boot. And for one suspended beat, every neighbor, every viewer, every name in Noor's chat watches the same tiny piece of metal rock to a stop. What balance tips when a symbol hits the ground? The SUVs idle like beasts pretending to sleep. The board stares like actors missing lines. Kara whispers that this can still be saved if everyone calms down and thinks. And Zane answers that calm is exactly what justice looks like when it stops asking permission. Are they ready to see what that looks like in motion? Gideon sours into silence as Elena finishes the cuffs. Noor calls out the case number again. Aries settles with a growl that feels like punctuation, and Zane tilts his head toward the barn where a new worry has been pulsing since the dog first pointed, because whatever they planted in here just bought itself a bigger. Crowbars tilt like answers no one asked for. Board members fan out with the lazy swagger of people who think consequences were never built for them. Elena squares her stance and tells everyone to keep distance. Gideon, wrists cuffed, still tries to conduct the scene with a smirk and a nod, and two suits move anyway, because obedience to power is a habit, isn't it? Aries glides forward, no bark, just promise. The nearest suit freezes mid-step, breath stuck halfway, bravado leaking out through his shoes. Zane stays centered, arms folded, the calm that terrifies people who rely on noise. Kara hovers between pleading and plotting, white suit creased at the elbow where nerves live. Noor's phone rises, chat exploding into a chorus of do not blink. If you were here, would you step back or step in? Gideon tells them to take the bag. Elena says try it, and the charge upgrades. The suit with the heavier jaw chooses a third path and knocks his shoulder into Zane. The impact lands like a dare. Zane doesn't stumble. He answers with a firm shove that returns exactly what he got. The suit backpedals, pride dented, and Aries fills the gap with a low rumble that redraws the line. Who owns a street when fear changes sides? Mrs. Calloway's voice cuts through, a weathered soprano with steel under it. She tells the board their game is over. She lifts a dusty box and slaps it into Noor's hands. 10 years of notices. 10 years of fees that didn't match any statute. 10 years of signatures that keep shaping to whichever neighbor looks most alone. Noor pins the box in frame. The comments turn into a courtroom. How many receipts does it take to end an era? Kara lunges for the papers still in her fist, trying to tear them before they reach any evidence bag. Elena grabs Kara's wrist and says not today. Kara snarls that Zane is hysterical and dangerous and keeps a weapon on the lawn. Aries stares at her hand until the tremor spreads up her arm. Dangerous looks different when it has training and a badge on its vest, doesn't it? Gideon hisses for someone to move. A younger board member, shirt too new, steps in with a staged kind of bravery and snatches at Noor's phone. The world lurches sideways as the stream jolts, and for a blink, it looks like silence will win. Elena pivots, catches the kid's collar, and pins him to the fence with one hand, voice calm, eyes sharper than cuffs. Noor breathes once, steady again. Viewers fill the chat with stay live, we've got you. Zane bends, retrieves a single page Kara let slip. The ink shines wrong even to a layman's eye. He lifts it chest high so the camera can drink the lie. Kara shakes her head so hard her pearl earrings knock against her neck. She says he is endangering the neighborhood with theatrics. Zane says the performance ended when a dead notary stamped tomorrow. Which story survives? One yelled loud, or one built on dates. The heavier jaw suit grabs a crowbar from an SUV and smashes a fence post in half. Splinters jump. Children across the street gasp. A mother curses into her sleeve. Elena's hand finds her cuffs again, and her voice finds a register that stops people with healthy survival instincts. Back up now. He doesn't. He reaches for Zane. Aries erupts like thunder with direction. The dog doesn't bite. He intercepts. Teeth snap inches from the man's wrist, clean enough to part the air, close enough to part courage. The crowbar clatters away like a guilty thought. The man stumbles and finds himself kneeling before a truth he can't argue with. What ends faster, the will to bully or the feeling in your hands? Kara makes one final gamble. She balls the remaining pages, spins, and hurls them toward the curb, aiming for a gutter, a tire, any oblivion that eats ink. Aries turns on instinct. A leap, a flash of muscle, a clamp of jaws midair. Paper halts between fangs like a confession intercepted. Nor screams, yes, without meaning to. The chat detonates hearts and fist emojis like fireworks. Who needs a soundtrack when justice writes its own percussion? Aries trots back and drops the page at Zane's boots. Zane lifts it with 2 fingers and smooths the edge where canine teeth kissed the margin without tearing evidence. Kara whispers, "Don't, please, not that one." Zane reads the header and the date. Tomorrow, noon. A transfer that hasn't happened, pretending it already hurts. His eyes meet Kara's and hold. You forge the future. Her mouth opens and closes, searching for a universe where that sentence doesn't stick to her name. Gideon coughs a laugh through the cuffs, trying to pivot the room back to his rhythm. He says paperwork always contains placeholders. That's how efficient boards move projects forward. Nor's viewers flood the chat with definitions and statutes and links that grind his spin down to dust. Efficiency becomes a mask nobody wants to wear on camera. Mr. Latif edges near Kara, eyes bent with disappointment that looks older than both of them. He tells her quietly that he vouched for her because once she had a spine that bent toward right. She flinches as if the words have weight. She says Gideon said it was routine. She says everyone does it. Routine doesn't ask you to steal a dead man's ledger and outrun a dog trained for truth, does it? Elena's phone buzzes with a callback. The DA's office comes through short and clipped, asking for status, confirming the live stream, instructing to preserve everything. She nods, relays, asks for immediate units. Sirens breathe closer again. The suits glance at each other, the way men do when the room stops agreeing to their version of gravity. Gideon goes for a new angle. He tells Zane his father would have taken a deal to save the street from spectacle. He offers to cover the mortgage for a year, waive all fines, write a letter that paints Zane as a pillar. Zane tilts his head, almost gentle, and asks which pillar falls first when the foundation is theft. Gideon's smile fractures like a thin plate under heavy cutlery. Nor swivels to Mrs. Calloway. The elder clears her throat and says Kara once threatened to fine her for a wind chime that sounded like hope. People laugh through their outrage. Humor slides in, sharp and healing. Across the lawn, more neighbors arrive with folders, screenshots, stories that braid into a rope strong enough to pull a board out by its roots. What would you have brought to the fence? Proof, anger, or both? The young board member, newly cuffed, breaks first. He mutters that he only carried the envelopes and didn't read them, that Gideon handled signatures, that Kara approved every line. Kara spins on him with shock that doesn't reach her eyes. Elena logs his statement word by word. Nor repeats it to the watching thousands. The rope tightens. Who unravels when light hits the first loose thread? Kara drops to her knees and begs Gideon for help, not Zane. She says her brother's medical bills ate everything, that Gideon promised a clean fix nobody would trace, that she didn't know the notary was gone. Gideon answers with the bored tone of a man who has practiced shedding allies like leaves. You knew enough. You took enough. You signed enough. The crowd hears what loyalty sounds like when it's hollow. Aries nudges Zane's thigh, a small reminder that the dog is reading air the way a judge reads faces. Zane lowers a hand and thanks him with a word that belongs to just them. Nor's chat coos for the hero without softening the edge of what must happen next. Elena calls in the final tag. Charges prepared, units seconds out, evidence secured, suspects identified, victim holding firm. Victim doesn't feel like the right word anymore, does it? A distant throb of engines rounds the block. Real backup, not bored theatrics. Gideon lifts his chin and lets a different smile out, the kind that says the next move was always bigger than cuffs. He nods toward the barn like a man opening curtains. A thin hiss slithers into hearing. Zane hears it. Aries hears it. Elena hears it and swears under her breath. A faint sweetness rides the air that people recognize too late on too many nights. Gideon tilts his head, all regret and no regret. He tells them clean slates are easier when there's nothing left to argue over. Kara's face empties. Mr. Latif staggers. Noor's hand trembles, and still the frame holds. The hiss deepens. A flicker kisses the edge of a doorway like a cruel signature searching for a page. Zane moves without asking permission from panic. Elena barks orders to clear space and grab extinguishers. Aries pulls toward flame with a decision born from training and love. Gideon closes his eyes as if appreciating an orchestra finally reaching the note he wrote. The crowd shouts over itself. A storm of "Don't you dare" and "Get back and save the ledger and save the dog." What would you reach for first, memory or breath? Heat crawls where it shouldn't. The hiss becomes a whispering roar. Noor's chat floods with hearts for Aries and warnings in all caps for Zane. Elena calls the DA back and says arson in progress. Kara sobs that she never agreed to this, and Gideon replies that outcomes don't ask for consent. The young board member starts praying, words tumbling, promises tripping over each other the way cowards sprint when the ground lights up. Zane locks eyes with Aries. The dog answers with a posture Zane has known since puppy days. Not yet. Wait. Now. He gives the smallest nod. Aries surges toward the doorway, a dark streak guided by trust. Zane sprints after him with a breath that tastes like old vows. Noor gasps. The world shrinks to two figures and a flame that decides to grow teeth. The barn breathes in, ready to exhale something. Aries bolts first, and Zane follows because some choices right themselves. Heat licks the doorway, a sharp hiss answering back like a dare. Noor's gasp catches in the stream. Tens of thousands ride that breath with her. Elena shouts orders that snap spines into motion. Gideon smiles with his eyes closed, the way men do when a plan starts hurting someone else. If this were your family's last proof, would you run for safety or run through fire? Inside, smoke claws for throat and memory, but Aries moves with purpose, low and certain, a compass set to legacy. Zane keeps one arm up and the other ready to grab the dog if he has to, speaking to him in short words they learned side by side. The world outside roars, the board mutters, the stream prays, and somewhere in that noise Zane hears his father's voice like a hand on his shoulder telling him to finish what men with titles couldn't undo. Whose voice do you follow when fear tries to lead? Aries veers hard toward the workbench like a soldier scenting a flag. Zane drops to a knee, reaches under, and fingers find leather that has known years. The ledger comes free, blackened at the edges, but whole in the spine, stubborn as the hands that wrote it. Zane coughs, tucks it into his shirt like a heartbeat, and urges Aries toward the light. A beam groans above them, a warning with splinters. They move faster. Which matters more, proof or breath, when both are starving for seconds? They burst out to a wave of sound that breaks into cheers when people see the ledger cradled safe. Elena grabs a fire extinguisher and tears a line across the doorway. Neighbors pass buckets, hands blistering without complaint. Noor's chat pours hearts for the dog until the screen looks like a storm of good. Kara staggers toward Zane, reaching for the ledger like instinct might still outrun consequence. Aries steps between, calm and coiled, and her hands hang empty in the air where control used to live. How fast can a life pivot when the gatekeeper loses the keys? Elena scans the faces and spots a detail she should not see. A board member at the rear, same blood in his jawline as Gideon, gripping a lighter with the absent-minded intimacy of habit. She walks straight at him, voice low and final, and the man stutters into a story that trips on its own shoes. He was told the barn was condemned. He thought he was helping. He thought fire was faster than courts. Elena cuffs him without ceremony while Noor reads his words aloud to a city that just learned how to listen. What truth is left when the alibi burns as hot as the crime? Gideon tries to clap with shackled hands, ugly and slow. He praises Zane's courage like he's awarding a medal to a rival he intends to bury anyway. He nods toward the ledger and calls it a relic. Zane doesn't answer Gideon. He opens to a page his father loved, a column of names who paid in pie and labor and sweat, and he holds it where Noor's lens can see. People type their grandparents' names in the chat like a roll call for the living. Who loses when memory refuses extinction? Sirens arrive with authority that belongs to the many, not the few. Tactical units fan out and give Elena the weight she needed 5 minutes ago. The captain clocks cuffs on Gideon, cuffs on the cousin, singed hair on Zane's forearms, and a dog sitting like a judge in a carved chair. Orders flow. Barriers go up. Statements begin. The board's neat smiles unravel into grimaces as if their faces forgot how to hold shape without applause. Gideon leans back against the fence calm again, as if the worst has already passed him. He tells Zane none of this matters because the county file has already been primed. He says progress doesn't wait for sentiment. He says the world belongs to who signs first. Zane laughs once, hoarse but clean, and answers that signatures lose altitude when they're written on smoke. The captain asks to see the forged pages. Elena hands them over with gloved fingers that treat paper like a loaded thing. Which is heavier, a pen or a match, when both aim at a family? Kara finally cracks into honesty, or something pretending to be it. She falls to knees streaked with soot and says she didn't mean to burn anything. She only meant to win. She says Gideon promised no one would ever trace a thing. She says she was saving the neighborhood from sliding into the wrong hands. Zane points at the neighbors who stepped forward with folders and fines and stories, and he tells her the hands were always right here. She just never looked for them. Where does power go when the mirror stops flattering? Noor's chat spikes with a city clerk's username again, the same voice from before, typing fast. Stop panicking. I pulled the file for review. Nothing final has been recorded, but a pre-file note exists with a Q stamp for morning. The clerk says the note came from a terminal assigned to a contracted runner inside the records office. The comment ends with 3 words that wake the whole lawn up at once. Check the badge. How deep do you dig when the roots are inside the building, not outside the fence? Elena relays to the captain, and his expression shifts to a weather only cops carry when they realize the storm isn't just local. He orders a secure line to the DA and IT, and tells a unit to run the runner. Kara watches the circle close and whispers to Gideon asking if there's another plan. Gideon tells her this was the other plan, and if it fails he will make another with someone who has both hands free. Loyalty sounds different when it's an expense, doesn't it? Mr. Latif steps forward on shaking legs and asks Kara a question he has earned the right to ask. He wants to know how much money buys the nerve to write a dead man's name out of his son's deed. Kara cannot look at him. She says a number without numbers, a sum measured in fear, debt, and pride. He nods once, slow, then turns to Zane and says a sentence that sticks to bone. Forgive me later if you can, but right now finish this. What do we owe the people who made a mistake and then chose to stand on the right side of its ending? Ares wanders to Zane and rests his head against Zane's knee for 1 second, as if stamping approval. Zane scratches the ear that grew gray too early and answers the dog with the smallest thank you a man can fit into breath. Noor chokes on a laugh cry that makes the chat flood hearts again. Even the captain softens a fraction before hardening back into the work. Softness belongs, but not yet. Kara tries to gather herself into leadership again and suggests a temporary truce. She talks about reputations and insurance and the value of moving on. Zane tells her moving on is what predators call it when they prefer their footprints fade. Noor reads that line twice for the viewers who will make it a caption. Mrs. Calloway murmurs that captions can be prayers when enough people repeat them. For a moment, the fire gives up ground, and the barn exhales with a wounded animal's relief. The captain nods to firefighters finishing the kill. People unclench just enough to feel how tired they are. Then Gideon lets out a breath that sounds like triumph. He tells Zane the ledger won't save him because the county pre-file triggered at dawn. He says the transfer slipped through already thanks to friends who know how to color inside and outside the lines. He smiles the kind of smile that makes honest people hate mirrors. Zane goes very still. Elena goes very cold. Noor goes very quiet. The captain asks Gideon to repeat it, and he does with glee, spelling out the company name, while Kara's face drains to the color of paper. The city clerk posts again in a rush. Check your email now. Emergency hold filed. But someone spoofed an internal authority and might have forced a shadow record. The captain's jaw sets. Ares lifts his ears. Zane's eyes lose their last trace of fatigue. Gideon leans forward, savoring the moment like a toast. He says the land is already gone on paper and that courts love things that already happened. He says Zane can keep his stories and his dog, but the dirt obeys different masters. He tilts his head with that easy cruelty and asks Zane how it feels to win the internet and lose the ground beneath his feet. And every voice on the lawn leans inward to hear the answer that will decide whether the night ends as a lesson or a warning, while the captain's phone buzzes with an update that will either break a heart or break a ring of men who thought paperwork could outrun justice. The captain's phone vibrates like a verdict and he reads fast, face going flat in that way that means something ugly just stood up. An internal badge requested the land transfer pre-file at dawn. A runner inside records pushed a shadow entry that will harden by morning if no one stops it. Nor repeats the update into the stream and the comments turn into a siren made of text. If this were your family, would you wait for office hours or force the door history keeps trying to close? Elena locks eyes with the captain and gets a nod that means move. She flags a unit to hunt the runner, rattles off descriptions from the clerk's messages appearing in real time, and posts 2 officers on the ledger like it's a living witness. Zane steadies his breath with one hand on Ares's collar and the other on the soot darkening his shirt where the ledger rests. Gideon watches with the smugness of a man who thinks paper cuts deeper than truth, asking how it feels to win the crowd and lose the record. Zane answers with quiet that stings more than any insult, because silence from a steady man is a promise, not an absence. Kara leans toward Gideon like a moth that still can't tell heat from light. She hisses about the fire, and he says outcomes do not ask permission. She glances at Elena, at the captain, at Nora's stream, and panic meets pride in a fight inside her eyes. Mr. Latif stands near enough to hear the last of Kara's excuses dissolve and says a single line about how trust breaks only once and then keeps breaking all by itself. She turns away like the words are a light too bright to look into. Ares twitches, reading the edge of the crowd as a squad car rolls up with a records runner in the back seat, wrists zip-tied, cheeks raw from crying. The officer opens the door. The runner spills apologies that sound like receipts for a debt he can't pay. He says a contractor gave him a form and a gift card, said it was busy work, said no one would ever notice. Elena shows him the live stream, the comments burning his name into history, and the runner folds, giving up the contractor, the time, the terminal number, the dock where the packet was handed over. How fast does guilt learn to speak when it sees its reflection multiplied by thousands? The captain gets IT on a secure line. The clerk on chat keeps pace, fingers flying. A hold can freeze the shadow file if the DA signs an emergency stay and a judge blesses it before dawn. They need the notary's obituary, the forged pages, the ledger's corroborating entries, and witness statements transmitted in minutes, not hours. Nor turns her stream into a war room. Viewers drop links, case law, screenshots of similar schemes in other neighborhoods. The crowd that used to fear fines becomes a research engine. Community outpaces conspiracy. Isn't speed the one thing power never expected kindness to master? Gideon tries to chuckle it off. He calls it overreaction. He says lots of neighborhoods do pre-files to keep projects on schedule. Mrs. Calloway quotes the fine he posted on a widow for a wind chime that sounded like hope, and the crowd laughs. A clean sound with a sharp edge. Gideon shrugs as if cruelty were just a line item. Kara finally snaps at him, voice thin and shaking, that he promised no flames, no arrests, no children crying. He tells her she heard what she needed to hear. Loyalty dies in its sleep. Elena dictates. Zane confirms. Nor reads back to thousands who correct timestamps when nerves make lips stumble. The captain compiles. The clerk transmits. A DA aide appears on speaker and asks for a reason to spend midnight capital on a patch of dirt the county already marked gray. Zane answers with the ledger's page of names paid in sweat, with the forged seal that blooms wrong in sunlight, with the message thread labeled Monday detailing staged photos, with a dog wearing a vest whose training writes truth in the space between warning and bite. The aide goes quiet the way people do when they feel a story press on their chest and ask for room. Kara sinks onto the grass and tears it in little bits like guilt found a rhythm for her hands. She whispers that she can help. Elena lifts an eyebrow, the kind that asks for proof. Kara says Gideon made her scan association keys at the hardware desk 3 months back, said they were duplicates for a safety audit, said it would save lives. She can list every property they copied. She can provide the texts. She can write the path from the first fingerprint to tonight's flame. Noor's stream drinks the confession. The chat does not forgive, but it listens. Aries watches Kara like a priest measuring repentance against pattern. The runner blurts one more detail, an awful small thing with big consequences. The shadow pre-file included a note that the parcel would be staked at sunrise for preliminary fencing. A contractor team is booked for first light. If the hold fails, men with hard hats and polite smiles will roll tape, sink posts, and laugh about how neighbors cry when lines move. The captain radios patrol to sit on the block until dawn. Elena's mouth is a razor. Zane's shoulders harden. If this were your lot, would you sleep tonight or stand guard with a dog who learned patience for exactly this? A notification dings like a drop of water on hot metal. The DA aide returns with a compromise that sounds like a cliff's edge. An emergency stay can pause the shadow record, but a judge must hear a voice that lived this, not just pages. Zane nods, steady, breath scratched by smoke, but carrying. He tells the knight how his father balanced bills with hay bales and repair jobs, how a young board once helped repair a fence instead of mailing fines, how that spirit calcified into fees and threats and signatures that stopped asking permission. He tells how Kara's perfume filled the barn before Aries raised his head, how a dead notary stamped tomorrow, how a dog leapt midair and saved the future by catching a page with his teeth. The aide says hold. The line goes quiet in a way that means motion behind the glass. Gideon mutters that even if the stay lands, the board will grind Zane in court, that lawsuits are marathons wealthy men train for. Zane says marathons end at tape just like sprints, and this community is done running without a finish. Noor reads that line back slow, and the chat pins it like a banner. Mr. Latif squeezes Zane's shoulder like a penance he hopes one day becomes gratitude. Kara covers her face and finally says the sentence corruption most fears. She is ready to testify. She can hand over the emails that use words like streamline and expedite to disguise trespass. She can name the shell companies and the law firm that coached signatures around missing dates. She is not asking for forgiveness. She is asking for the chance to make the truth heavier than her fear. Elena nods once and tells a deputy to take her statement on a separate channel. No edits, no pauses. Aries circles back to Zane and sits, posture perfect, gaze gentle and iron, and the crowd inhales in a single softened sound. Noor wipes her eyes and laughs at herself, embarrassed and unashamed. The captain lets a human smile slide for an instant before rearming his expression. The fire gutters into steam. The knight is still a fist, but the knuckles are loosening. Another notification lands. The clerk writes 3 words in the chat that bounce like flares. Judge is in. The DA aide returns on speaker and says the petition looks strong but needs one final anchor. A sworn timeline into the record with witness signatures. Elena is already there, pen in hand, body cam recording, voice steady as a metronome. Zane signs. Noor signs. Mrs. Calloway signs with a flourish that looks a lot like a vow. The runner signs, shaking. Kara signs last. Eyes steady for the first time all night. Gideon snorts that signatures are theater. He says they make people feel brave before the paperwork eats them. He says the county loves neat stacks, not messy hearts. The captain's phone buzzes mid-sneer. He reads, then looks at Gideon the way a man looks at a snake in a jar. Emergency stay granted, temporary hold placed, internal audit triggered by a suspicious badge trail. Contractor notified to stand down pending investigation. Noor repeats it and the lawn erupts in a sound that isn't quite a cheer and isn't quite a sob, but carries both like brothers. Gideon's smile doesn't crack, it curdles. He says holds expire. He says audits get lost. He says friends dine well. And then headlights wash the curb and a sedan rolls up with a city seal on the plate frame. A man in a suit steps out carrying a folder thick enough to change pressure in a room. He introduces himself without pleasantries and says he has been sent to serve notice. The captain bristles, Elena narrows, Noor focuses, Zane plants his feet. The official opens the folder and pulls out a document with a heading that makes even Gideon's eyes flicker. Countywide HOA audit, emergency session scheduled, mandatory testimony compelled, records seizure authorized, and a list of neighborhoods longer than a winter night. He says this street is first at dawn. He says bring everything. He says no one is leaving the city with boxes tonight. The crowd breathes like a choir learning a new hymn. Kara sags, equal parts relief and dread. Gideon finally loses a millimeter of height, as if the ground beneath him remembered gravity. Aries presses against Zane's leg, warm and present, a heartbeat with teeth. And before anyone can call it victory, the official adds one line that resets every pulse on the lawn. A shadow record did post for 10 minutes before the hold hit, stamped by a judge's stolen credentials. It has been quarantined, not erased. At sunrise, either the audit kills it publicly, the official's words land like a drumbeat, and everyone looks to Zane because some nights choose their witness. He answers with a nod that feels like a signature, then turns to Elena and asks for one last pass through the timeline so nothing slips. Elena reads it back like a vow. Kara listens with lips pressed white, holding a pen like it might absolve if used correctly. Gideon rests his cuffed wrists against the rail and smirks as if dawn belongs to him by habit. Nor steadies the stream and invites the city to remember this exact minute. She repeats the names of neighbors who stepped up, the case numbers the clerk posted, the way Aries caught a page Madare and turned a forgery into a confession. The chat answers with a wall of hearts and a chorus of "We're here." Mrs. Calloway pats the ledger as if blessing a grandchild. Mr. Latif stands beside Zane with the quiet of a man who broke something and then decided to help rebuild it piece by piece. A unit returns from records with a flash drive sealed in an evidence pouch and a sworn statement from the runner. The captain plugs it into a field tablet, and the first image freezes every breath. A login screen with a judge's credentials typed by a hand that wasn't his. A second image shows the runner's terminal pinged by an outside device 3 minutes earlier. IT labels it a hop, a borrowed doorway. Gideon watches the slideshow like a movie he thought he financed and now sees for the first time. Elena flips the forged page under a UV wand. The ghost seal flares wrong again. The official nods, satisfied enough to plant his next flag. Record seizure begins now. He signs a form that turns everyone's pockets into evidence if they hold the wrong weight. 2 deputies escort Gideon's cousin to the curb and load him into a car. He shouts that he didn't know. Elena answers that not knowing is expensive when you hold a lighter near another man's story. Kara steps forward and chooses the hard thing. She hands Elena her phone and a folder from her bag, fingers trembling but steady in purpose. Inside are emails that dress trespass as courtesy, spreadsheets that convert empathy into fee schedules, a draft speech about stewardship that reads different now that everyone knows what stewardship meant. She says, "Put my name on all of it." She says, "I will testify." The neighbors do not cheer. They nod, which is heavier. The captain's screen pings with a live signature from a judge who is very awake. The emergency stay hardens into an order. The shadow record is quarantined, flagged in red letters that look like a boundary line reappearing on a map. The official calls it a tourniquet. Zane calls it a start. Nor repeats both and asks viewers a question that hits like a mirror held steady. What would you protect if paperwork tried to steal it from under your door? Gideon tries one last performance. He tells the crowd that audits turn into politics and politics turns into dust, and dust settles on everything. He says you will tire, and I will not. Zane answers with humor that hits like iron wrapped in velvet. He says he has Aries, a ledger, 10,000 witnesses, and a neighborhood that just remembered how to stand up. He says if dust settles, we'll write in it. Aries nudges forward, tail low, eyes calm, the posture of a guardian who understands that victory isn't noise but vigilance. A child across the street whispers that the dog is a hero, and Nord Stream repeats it until hero stops sounding like a movie word and starts feeling like a job title earned. The official reads the audit schedule aloud, and it sounds like a clock counting courage. First at dawn here, then 4 more streets by noon, a press conference by sunset. Kara's hands shake again. She asks Zane if there is anything she can do before the sun shows everyone the worst of her. Zane tells her 2 things with the kindness of a man who refuses to let punishment do the whole teaching. Tell the truth without decorating it. Return every key you copied. Mr. Latif apologizes to the ledger with a touch no one makes fun of. He tells Noor's audience that fear is a poor accountant. It never adds right. He thanks Aries out loud, and the dog tilts his head like he understands every syllable. Elena signs her last log entry of the night. an inked spine for a story that no longer bends in the wind. The DA aide returns to speaker with a final instruction. Hold through sunrise. Escort the audit team. Forbid any removal of files. Expect pressure from phones that think they still ring loud enough to move the world. The captain answers that the phones can sing to voicemail. He points 2 units at the street corners and posts one more on the ledger like a guard at a museum. Nor keeps streaming because the city sleeps better when documentation breathes. Gideon's mask finally shows a hairline crack. He asks the official whether friendships still count for something. The official replies that friendship is not a credential. Elena adds that tonight friendship looks like neighbors carrying boxes of fines to the fence instead of carrying them alone. Mrs. Calloway says friendship also looks like cookies, and the crowd laughs because relief needs a door and humor is often it. Zane kneels and thanks Aries with that private word again, then stands and faces the people who almost lost what they paid for with birthdays, repairs, and stubborn mornings. He says a block is not a spreadsheet. He says the ledger is a family album written in ink and work. He says they can take pictures of everything because nothing true fears flash. He says the barn will be rebuilt and the sign stays where it is as both warning and welcome. Kara asks if her statement can include the names of the attorneys who taught her how to lace signatures through loopholes. Elena says yes and looks at Gideon because some answers write themselves. He tries to laugh, but it dries on his tongue. The captain gets a text from IT confirming the identity behind the stolen judicial credentials. It belongs to a clerk who sold access for cash and concert tickets. Deputies roll out to bring him in. Nora's comments become a wave of disbelief that hardens into determination. Dawn begins to wash the edges of the night. The audit van turns onto the street with hazard lights blinking like beacons. The official lifts a sheaf of warrants and the team steps out carrying boxes labeled with the names of neighborhoods that will learn today they were never alone. Zane opens his gate and says we start with the board records and the hardware desk Kara mentioned. Kara nods and walks beside Elena without needing a hand on her arm. Aries sits at the path's edge, regal and ready, the picture of a promise kept. Children point and whisper the dog's name with smiles that carry gratitude more easily than adults do. Mr. Latif grips Zane's shoulder and asks whether forgiveness has a schedule. Zane answers that it shows up after accountability clocks in, not before. Nor repeats the line until it belongs to everybody. The audit team photographs the forged pages, lifts prints off the duffel, archives the runner's statement, and tags the crowbars that spoke in dents. The captain signs off on transfers. The DA aide says the hearing will open with Nora's footage and close with the ledger. The official says the county will recommend restitution, removal, and referrals. The neighborhood says nothing. It just stands there together, which is louder. Gideon asks to make a call. The captain says he already made too many. Kara asks if she can speak to the block. Zane says they heard her tonight and will hear her again under oath. She nods, eyes wet, and for the first time doesn't try to pull herself taller with posture. She simply stands as a person who broke and chose the harder repair. Aries rises and leans into Zane's knee, and Zane places the half-burned ledger on the fence under the warning sign and nails it there with 3 clean strikes, the sound traveling like a bell. He says this is what belongs to us. He says this is what happens when you protect what's yours. Nor holds the frame as thousands type the same sentence into comment boxes across a city awake to itself. The official closes his folder and says one last thing. The shadow record still lives in quarantine, and the hearing must kill it in public or it will replicate in private. He asks whether the community can show up as strongly in daylight as it did in the dark. The answer rises from throats that were tired an hour ago and aren't anymore. Yes, together. The captain signals the line forward, and the team moves toward the clubhouse to gather what once hid behind polished doors. Elena walks beside Kara, who speaks names with a steady voice. Mr. Latif follows with a hand on his heart. Mrs. Calloway carries the box of fines like a trophy of things survived. Zane steps last with Aries, smiling at the kind of smile grief rarely allows, the one that says love fought and won. And as dawn finally lifts the night off the street, the neighborhood crosses it like a threshold, ready to testify, ready to rebuild, ready to make sure that when another board thinks paperwork can outpace truth, a dog with a badge and a city with a memory are already waiting.